Dr. Carla Brailey, thank you so much for joining us. You are a former vice chair of the Texas Democratic Party, and now you are running for lieutenant governor. And I'm wondering why you are running and what are your priorities?
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I really believe our democracy is at stake. We can do the work today so that we will have a better future in the state of Texas. We know that many things have been challenged and many Texans have not been included and in politics, they have not been at the center. And quite frankly, I really believe in my work as the vice chair of the past 2.5 years, just really to getting to know people on the ground, working with elected officials, working with candidates who are really trying to move a democratic values in the state of Texas in a way that we have not done in some time. Uh, our current leadership has failed the state. Dan Patrick has been more concerned with hateful rhetoric, attacks on our rights, and conspiracy theories, and not focused on building a state that cares for all Texans. So I'm running so that we can do the work today so that tomorrow will be a better place in the state of Texas. And I intend to work with any and everyone who is willing to ensure that we have a high quality, inclusive education and in a way that our students can graduate and compete and give something to the workforce in a way that allows them to be more innovative and connect with various industries that we're going to be growing in Texas. Then, I really believe that healthcare has to be expanded and it has to be affordable and accessible. Texas has some of the highest rates of Black maternal mortality and morbidity rates. We can do better. We're big in Texas. We have the world's largest medical center, and we need to be able to serve all Texans, regardless of their zip code. And then it goes to not mentioning that we must look at jobs and wages. People have to have a livable wage. And so we have to do better with that. And in turn, that connects to what support we have to give to small businesses. And hey, we have to say that the power grid is absolutely a major issue. With the power grid, we know that even if we were to have a heavy or a crisis related to the weather right now, we still don't know where we stand. So as lieutenant governor, it will be important for me to be able to make appointments for people to lead these committees in a way that oversight, transparency, and accountability is there. And so for me, at the end of the day, I think that all the things that connect to all the things I just addressed is education. At the end of the day, we have to make sure that Texans have a fair shot at a higher quality of life. And that is going to mean also that we have to do all that we can to ensure that traditional education, public school, is put as a priority in a way that students, teachers, parents feel comfortable that their children are safe even during a pandemic. And then also, we have to make sure that we are prepared for things like a pandemic, whether it's due mask mandates or whether it is also through making sure that we have a renowned uh, virtual program. We have to be ready in the state of Texas, and we can do those things.
As you know, you're running against two other Democrats in the primary. So how do you convince Democratic voters across the state that you are best to represent them in the fall against the likely nominee of Dan Patrick?
Well, I'm a mother, I'm an educator, I'm a movement builder. I've been doing this work as vice chair of the Texas Democratic Party. I'm already doing the work. For the past 3.5 years, I have traveled across this state working with people both in and out of season. And that is what is going to matter. People have to know that we understand their issues. They have to understand that we know the message in a way that can reach them, that can increase turnout. Turnout is going to be essential. People have to feel like there's hope, like it's a reason for them to turn out. And I've done that for some time, and I really believe that I'm the best candidate that will be able to unseat Dan Patrick.
Let me ask you, because there were polls that just came out over the weekend, and they show that most people don't know who they're going to vote for, and they don't know the candidates in the lieutenant governor Democratic primary. And we've also seen fundraising numbers out there. So my question to you is, how are you going to get your message out and really convince people when they don't know who, the candidates are?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. The poll actually is very hopeful. It lets us know that we have work to do, that we can reach those 53% that are still making their mind up. And that comes from organizing and mobilizing and working on the ground. We win Texas locally. How we win locally is to work with people who are doing the work. They are trusted validators, they are credible, and people understand that if we're going to have a change, then they have to be at the center of that change. It has to make sense. So I'm actually pretty elated about where we are as a campaign, the infrastructure that we have. And look, money is absolutely important. Endorsements are important, but votes matter. Votes count. And that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that we go to communities that may not have been engaged by other elections or by other candidates, and that's what we intend to do. I'm very, very hopeful as my relationships will really pan out in a way that we'll have ambassadors on the ground, and so we have the resources. I feel really, really good about that. Being in the race, getting in the race December 13th, and now at the end of January, I think that we are definitely making a footprint in this election.
How concerned are you about a runoff?
Elections are elections, and we have to run this. We have to run the race to win. And, we're going to do whatever we need to do. But we intend to look pretty good on March the 1st, and we'll go from there. But the people will speak. And I'm hoping that the people will speak for the people's candidate, Carla Brailey, for lieutenant governor.
If you are to win the general election in November, my question to you is, you would still likely deal with a dominant Republican majority in the state Senate. And so how would you be able to govern and accomplish the things that are your priorities when you have a mostly Republican Senate?
I think that's a wonderful question. One of my late great sheroes is Barbara Jordan. And one of the things that she said early on, I think it may have been in her autobiography, is that when she went to the Senate, she didn't go as in the majority, but she learned early on what it meant to be able to build coalitions and speak to her colleagues both in and out of the Senate. And she mentioned that if you can get to the heart of other politicians who are serving their constituents just as well as you are, then you can change policy for that moment. And that's what it's going to be about. We have to work across the aisle. We have to be able to identify those more senior Democrats who are willing, to push policy forward. But we also have to acknowledge Republican senators who are doing the work for their constituents as well, and understand that whatever we do, we have to put people at the center of those policies and not profit. And I believe that we can do that across the board. That's going to be the first thing that we have to do, which means that is going to dictate what type of appointments that will be made on the committees. At the end of the day, we know that the lieutenant governor controls the agenda, definitely connects to the budget, what happens, but more so than anything, the lieutenant governor is able to actually determine who's going to lead these committees. And that's going to mean a lot, but we'll have to work across the board. And we've done that. Texas has been, we've had civility in the past. It's this leadership that has failed us, and we can do better in Texas. And that's what I intend to do as lieutenant governor.
I wanted to ask, one of the things that you mentioned as one of your priorities is access to health care. And I know that the state has rejected expanding Medicaid. So what is your solution? What is your plan for increasing access to health care?
Well, the plan is that, we have to listen to our partners. We have to work with, the federal government and accept funds that to date that we have constantly declined. And that's the start. We're living leaving almost $10 million on the table. We have some of the highest uninsured rates in the state of Texas, and the premiums are so high that even our Texans who are getting a living wage cannot afford to pay their premium. So there's a lot that we have to do in healthcare, but I think it starts with, just be willing to take support, to work together, to partner with doctors, as well as the federal government to ensure that we get what all Texans need. That's a start.
You spoke before about voting rights, and I'm wondering what changes would you like to see made in the state law that just passed?
Well, quite frankly, it's the 21st century. I think that anything we do in the 21st century, we should be expanding, not excluding. So the first thing that we would do is to ensure that we lighten the load of those who are working, to push out the vote, because at the end of the day, voting is our choice, and it doesn't mean that we're going to vote whether it's Republican, Democrat, or Independent. But the bottom line is we need to make sure that we have laws that allow people to be able to make those choices and make them freely. The restrictions that we even seen that attempted to go forth with the disability population, we know that at the end of the day, we just have to do better, with enhancing, and providing the means that people can vote. If we have the capacity to allow people to vote 24 hours a day so that we can acknowledge those people who have, non-traditional hours of working or responsibilities, let's do that. Let's make it easier to vote. When we look at the possibility of potentially being able to register to vote when we, apply for our driver's license, let's do that. But whatever we do, let's enhance the opportunities and options for people to have a voice, and that is our vote. That is what is at the core of our democracy, and we have to do better in that.
You also mentioned the power grid. Do you have any plans to improve the security and as far as the reliability of the grid, especially in severe weather?
Absolutely. Texas, we can't continue to be a lone ranger. Yes, we're big in Texas, and I'm part of the culture of Texas. I love Texas. Texas is our home, but we have to be willing to partner. We have to be willing to listen to science. We have to be willing to work with the federal regulations that are out there. We know that we did not have to experience what Texans over hundreds of lives were lost during the winter storm. I'm still out of my home right now due to the winter storm. We have to do better. We have to weatherize, in a way that we're not totally just dependent on oil and gas. I mean, it's a bigger topic. So yes, the grid is absolutely important, but it's how we do energy in the state of Texas. It's how we work with other partners in the state of Texas. And it's how we make appointments. It's how we lead, choose for those who's going to lead these appointments. So we have work to do in that. But the first thing is oversight. The first thing is to have a plan that's an ongoing plan, that we have various people who are experts in that area. And then we make a decision to be able to partner with not only federal government, but also mimic what other states are doing and look at their best practices.
And let me ask you to follow up on that. Does that mean, because right now Texas is not really part of the national grid, it's independent. Are you saying that you think that Texas should be part of the national grid?
Yes, I definitely think that we have to do better. And if that means, I think we're going to have to do some research there. And I think that, we have concluded that this may not be the best way to ensure that all Texans receive the electricity, the energy that we need in the state of Texas. But I definitely think that's on the table.
I wanted to ask you about the situation at the southern border. The state, as you know, is spending $3 billion on border security, more than it ever has, and is in the process of building its own wall. Where are you on this?
Look, we all need to be safe. And the reality is, every person, not just Texan, but in the United States, everywhere in the world, should be upheld with dignity and respect. The Lone Star Project, we know that that has not been helpful. We know that even those who are protecting the borders in terms of soldiers and people who've dedicated their lives as law enforcement. We know that they're on and a lot of stress. The reality is, the wall may not necessarily be the answer in some cases. We have to work with, again, the federal government. That's immigration, we know, is a federal government issue, but we can do better in terms of how we fund and how we ensure that we message in a way that we can be united. And that's what people we don't need to lead on fear. We need to lead in terms of how everyone can feel safe. And Lone Star Project, we can't say that money is well spent right now. And I started off when you asked me earlier about priorities. Priorities right now, we know it's education, we know it's jobs, and we have to make sure that any additional funding that we have in this state, that whether it's revenues that is driven, given in our state, we have to make sure that we properly fund our public education system.
And my last question to you is, there's been so much in the news lately, headlines, et cetera, in the courts about vaccine mandates. So where are you on whether there should be a vaccine mandate, or, as Governor Abbott has put in his executive order, a ban on vaccine mandates in Texas?
We know now that vaccine saves lives. We know that vaccines have allowed us to continue to be able to function, not only in our state, but in our nation and in the world. Science has spoken, and I'm an educator of 20 years. I'm a sociologist, and I really believe that we have to follow the science. And we're all in this together. This is not a pandemic that you or I really can determine what's next for us. We know that we have to do this together, and vaccines allow us to do this pandemic together so that we can get back to some normalcy in our country, across the world.
Dr. Carla Brailey, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the work that you do. We can't do this without journalism, good journalism.
Thank you so much.